Welcome to Ambivalent Offenders. This is Erin. Over on Patreon, to mark the 4th of July, we have an episode power ranking our founding fathers and mothers. I'm here to give you a clip in case you want to hear what we cover. And if you like it, you can follow the links and sign up for the Patreon to get the entire hour-and-a-half episode. Thanks, everybody, and have a safe and fun 4th of July if you are celebrating. Now, on to the clip.
So you ready? Here we go.
Let's kick it off.
All right, so we're going to start with George.
Of course. We have to.
Here's what I'm going to say for what he does. He is an effective commander. It's an 8-year war of independence. Most of the odds are stacked against us. You would never want to study Washington as a strategist. He's not Napoleon. But I think he realizes very early on that the key to success, the key to independence, is going to be to hold the army together. Because so long as it stays in the field, so long as there is still organized military resistance to the British presence in the 13 colonies, then eventually they will be worn down. And that's ultimately what delivers victory, is through near starvation, through brutal conditions sometimes.
Like Valley Forge.
Right. There's no way around it. And his presence manages to sustain a cohort of men around him to continue the struggle.
So you'd say this is not like a once-in-a-generation kind of commander, but good enough to lead to victory? Is that what you're landing at? Okay.
And, some of the most spectacular victories of the war, like Saratoga, that's not Washington. Yorktown definitely is a Washington victory, but that's also, Yorktown is a campaign that depends upon French naval assistance and combat troops. He's disciplined, he's organized, he knows how to motivate and inspire.
It's not his singular genius.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to get some points.
Yeah, as he should. As he should. Believe me, we are not denigrating the great George Washington.
No. Now, for me, I think it's actually some of the decisions he does not undertake. It's some of the things he chooses not to do that should be more celebrated. And I can think of a couple. The one that first jumps to mind is at war's end, right around 82, 83, his own officers start orchestrating a coup, the Newburgh conspiracy.
Well, really?
And they're trying to tease out whether or not he will support it.
What's the coup to overthrow what?
Well, essentially, they're unpaid. His officers are unpaid. There's talk that land to the west that, in some measure motivated many to fight in the first place, the Ohio Valley territories that were originally blocked by Parliament in 1763 for colonial settlement. There was talk of essentially giving officers land grants out there, which Washington was very curious about because he had land investments out there as well through the Ohio Company, along with someone else on this list, Ben Franklin. But anyway, the soldiers were unpaid. The Continental Congress, which at this point had transitioned over to the Articles of Confederation Congress, had basically ignored the army. Many of the officers that came from established backgrounds had used some of their own resources to finance the war effort, and they're just bitter. There's talk that maybe they should just march to Philadelphia and stage a coup and install Washington as the new King George.
Ah, okay. So we're not electing him. It's by military decree, sort of a Oliver Cromwell-esque.
Except they were more in love with classical references, so they would have said Caesar. But yeah, you've got it.
Well, I mean, they were descendants from Puritans, but fair enough. I wouldn't want the Oliver Cromwell.
Well, you're right, but as a Virginian, Washington found those Puritans and their grandchildren to be an odd lot.
A little strange.
But anyway, that's got an asterisk on it because his critics would say, well, maybe the reason he didn't want to take the helm is because he felt like the country was about to collapse. It was crippled by inflation, and who would have wanted to take over at that point?
I'll pass.
But I mean, the fact of the matter is, I would be willing to look past that and say, no, he has the opportunity if he wants to make himself a dictator, and he chooses not to.
I think we'll obviously be talking about him giving up power later. So I think if you put two
Right.
and two together. Looking at them both, it seems like that is a character trait, not just this one off. And I could certainly see somebody more ambitious, say an Aaron Burr, who, if you haven't listened to the episodes, we do have a 2-part series on Aaron Burr, so you could go listen to that. But in his hands, I could see him certainly being like, oh, you want me to do a coup? Perfect. I will be your military dictator. So it is saying something that Washington doesn't bite.
And that's actually in my points in his favor for things he does not do, walking away from the presidency after the conclusion of the second term. That was the very next item in my notes, so we can check that off.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Now we come to the most aggressive post-revisionist criticism. And this is actually something that triggered a bit of an argument among historians when the 1619 Project, which I think has some amazing historical scholarship at its core, but it did generate some criticism from like Gordon Wood, who we lost just a couple weeks ago. And this is what I would call the Somerset paranoia takedown of at least the Virginia participants in the revolution. This may be something listeners aren't as familiar with. In the middle of the revolutionary experience, so like 1772, like you're a year away from the Tea Act and then the Tea Party.
Pre-war, no Boston Tea Party, nothing like that.
So there's a case moving through the British court system involving a man named James Somerset.
Okay. I've never heard of this, so I'm genuinely curious.
Well, I wanted to pepper some stuff in here that might be a little bit outside kind of the mainstream knowledge of this particular period.
And that's why we love you, Matthew. That's why you're the best.
Well, thank you. But you have to say that because we're married.
The point still stands.
So James Somerset was an enslaved man who we're not entirely sure where he had lived in colonial America. It's interesting. The two standing theories are it was either Virginia or Massachusetts, which I always like my students to remember that going into the revolution, slavery is legal in all 13 colonies. And even though we think it probably took root culturally in Virginia first, the earliest statutes you can find that describe the lives and limitations and restrictions that will be imposed on enslaved peoples, they actually come from Massachusetts, not from Virginia.
But shocking.
James Somerset's master in 1769 moves to London and brings Somerset with him. A few years later, in the fall of 71, Somerset escapes. He manages for about 2.5 months. He's on the run, and he's eventually captured. His master, outraged, is going to punish him by dumping him onto a boat headed for the Caribbean. He's going to be sent into the human machinery that is sugar plantation slavery, like in Jamaica or Barbados.
The worst of the worst.
Who knows how, from a modern perspective, we can rank order the suffering, but even at the time, it certainly had that reputation. Prior to that ship's departure, there are some radical abolitionists in Great Britain who file a writ of habeas corpus on his behalf, which is habeas corpus protections are something that are enshrined in our Constitution in Article 1.
Mm-hmm.
The case works its way all the way up to the King's Bench. The ruling is, in 1772, that enslavement is a fundamental violation of natural law.
I like that, but I have a feeling I'm not going to like what comes after.
James is freed.
Yay. And everything goes on and everything's perfect.
Well, right. See, this is the paradox of it, though. At the time, the British Empire is not quite the juggernaut that it'll be a generation or two later, once it gets through the Napoleonic Wars. But it was very clear in the ruling that it was not meant to apply to any colonial possession of the British Empire. And, depending upon how you define subjugation and slavery, you can make an argument that decades after Britain abolishes slavery, it's still, in a way, is kind of practicing it. If you ask the people of India during the Second World War who are starving,
Yep, good point.
do you feel as though you are still under the tether of the British Empire? In much the same way that if you're a sharecropper
Jim Crow. Hmm.
In Alabama in the 1890s, you might say, well, I don't know that 13th Amendment did everything that we thought it would.
Didn't really apply to me.
What I'm getting at here, though, is that for Washington and for many other Virginia prominent participants in the American Revolution, oftentimes the criticism will be laid at their feet that, well, the only reason that they are participating in this revolution, the only reason that they're talking about independence and liberty and equality is the terror that if they remain subjects of the British Empire, that this Somerset decision will be extended to them as well.
Oh, yeah, that's not great.
And now it's an argument that I understand why it has traction. I think there's a chronological problem with it, though, which is, by 1772,
the ball's kind of been rolling. I mean, it's a small roll.
Right.
It doesn't go quite as fast and as big if you're thinking a snowball. It's just at the beginning. It's just those initial crumbs.
Right.
But it's at least started at this point, if not to the full-blown pre-revolution activities that we think about, like you said, the Tea Act and the Boston Tea Party, the stuff that goes down at Concord.
Right, that's all just a few years away. Now, admittedly, we don't have all of Washington's letters because, well, Martha burned their private letters shortly after he died.
Good job, Martha, to the bane of historians everywhere.
We do have historical evidence about either his public statements from the House of Burgesses or private letters where he's angry about the proclamation line of 1763, barring Western settlement. He's angry about the Stamp Act. That's where we see the first no taxation without representation argument. The idea that this is the fulcrum for why Washington takes up arms against the British Empire, I think that probably goes a little too far, but that's the most damning criticism that I think you typically see laid at his feet, and to a certain extent Jefferson's as well.
That wouldn't just be Washington in this case.
And now it wouldn't be our podcast if we didn't invite listeners who are not driving to open up a window or a tab in their browser.
Yeah, I'm doing it.
You ready? Here we go. I want you to do a Google search for Brumidi, Brumidi, and then Washington.
Okay. Oh, the apotheosis of Washington.
There you go. Can you describe for the listeners, what are you looking at?
It looks like something you'd see on the Sistine Chapel. So is this is it the Washington Cathedral?
This is actually in the Capitol.
Oh, is it in the Capitol? Okay. Is that what it's called? The cathedral there?
That's the National Cathedral.
National Cathedral. There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And this, as religious as this looks, you're not there. You're at the floor of the Capitol Rotunda.
You see Washington in the middle. He's surrounded by a lot of ladies. So many ladies. I assume angels, but looks like he's a ladies' man in this. There's a woman with a little bugle next to him with, I assume, an olive branch, it looks like.
Yeah.
You can see some of the other founders. It's like a double circle. So he's in the middle, and then on the outside, looks like the other founders. There's a guy who I assume is Ben Franklin. He's right next to a rainbow. Happy Pride Month. Happy Pride Month.
And then what is the Google machine telling you about the definition of apotheosis?
I know we've talked about this. If it sounds familiar to our listeners, we've talked about the one with Lincoln in our Mary Todd Lincoln podcast.
Yeah, which is a variation on this where Washington's up there welcoming Lincoln into heaven.
It refers to the elevation or deification of a mortal to godhood. So this is him ascending to heaven.
If you're the exact opposite of a post-revisionist critic, this is where you'd go. You would say that Washington was...
He's our god in America.
Which I think if you could put Washington into the rotunda today, first of all, he would probably be pleased that his tomb there is empty because they were originally going to bury him there. And
oh, really?
As we've discussed before, he was paranoid about being buried alive, and at least if you're buried alive at Mount Vernon, there's a chance someone will hear you.
Not in the Capitol?
Well, the rotunda has great acoustics, but if you're inside a stone sarcophagus...
Oh, that's true. You don't have a chance by the time they chisel that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd take my chances at Mount Vernon.
But anyway, I think he would be a little bit upset by how literally over the top this is.
A little over the top. This is a little embarrassing.
Did you see me lose New York? Did you see me lose New Jersey?
I have a feeling, at least again, from the evidence, he doesn't seem like he's high on his supply. So I don't think that he would particularly love this. It is very over the top schmaltzy, but who knows? Maybe we're wrong and he'd be well pleased.
He's on Mount Rushmore too.
True.
That takes us to the last two categories. His conventional rank, he's usually at the top, and he has been for generations. He is involved in all three acts of the revolutionary experience. He's there during the buildup prior to Lexington and Concord. He's put in control of that quote unquote army that's outside Boston after Lexington and Concord. And he is a reluctant participant in what we'd call the early federal period when the Constitution is debated and ratified. And he knows, everybody knows, that he's going to be chosen as its first executive. That takes us to the odd historical fact that benefits him. I'm going to give you the odd historical fact that benefits him, and then I'm curious if you have any theories as to why historians feel that this benefited him. Here we go.
Okay.
Washington, maybe because of tuberculosis earlier in life, maybe because of smallpox earlier in life, was probably sterile.
Okay. Is it because now he didn't have to make the choice of, am I going to pass this presidency on to an heir?
Yep.
It's basically the opposite of what happens to, if anybody knows Roman history, Marcus Aurelius. He ends this period called the Five Good Emperors. Yes, we're delaying and we're going into Roman history, but I don't know as much about American history, so Matt's going to have to suck it up and listen to me, and so are you.
Oh, I always like these parts because I learn a lot. A huge blind spot for me.
Most people, if you're looking at Roman history, that's five good emperors. If you were to live at any point during the Roman Empire, you'd want to live during this time period. This is Rome at its height. It's at its zenith. At the end, there's Marcus Aurelius. He's the last of the five good emperors. You would recognize him from the movie Gladiator because his son, Commodus, he ends that reign because he is just like Commodus in Gladiator. That is true. He was obsessed with gladiators. But the point is, the thing that made these five good emperors good and probably prevented a Commodus was that none of them had living children. They all ended up adopting the next emperor. So Trajan adopts Hadrian. Then the first one that does have a son, it ends up being Marcus Aurelius. And he's known for his meditations. He has a very good reputation overall. But the one thing that always comes up that is the one blemish usually on his reputation is that he had a son and then he didn't do what the other ones did and adopt somebody else. He passed it on to Commodus, and that's when Rome starts to get into their very early parts of its decline. So, and Roman history, that's immediately what I thought when you mentioned that.
See, I learned a lot there.
Did you?
I did. Like, for example, I didn't know that Hadrian was on the list of the five good ones. All I know about is the wall. I feel so stupid about that.
The five good emperors are technically Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. I think some of them had children, but none of them were living at the time that they passed it on. So they had to do this adoption, and it turned out really well. And then the first one that was actually able to pass it on to their son didn't turn out well. That's the thing, is you could say Washington, hypothetically, he could have had a Commodus, but he could also have had an equally illustrious and good son too. But I do think for the America that we have now, him not having a son definitely made it easier to have a transition of power.